Welcome to this tutorial video where I'm going to be giving you a brief introduction into what a programming paradigm is. Now, a programming paradigm, the definition of it is a way of classifying a particular programming language according to the style in which programs are written in that language. Okay, so a programming paradigm is a way of classifying programming languages according to the style in which programs are written in that language. And you've got some programming languages which will only be supporting one programming paradigm, and they can be classified using a single programming paradigm. Whereas others can be multi-paradigm, and that is where that programming language supports multiple programming paradigms. So let's take the example of assembly language. Assembly language could be considered to be a single paradigm language because it will only be supporting an imperative style of programming. Assembly language is single paradigm. It's imperative. You could also say that it's unstructured. It's kind of single paradigm in that it's imperative, but it's also unstructured, so maybe you could argue that it's multi-paradigm as well. An example of a language that is definitely multi-paradigm is Python. Python supports lots of programming paradigms such as object-oriented, procedural, functional, and more. So Python is definitely multi-paradigm, and most code written in Python will be considered to be structured. What do I mean by all these different programming paradigms? Object-oriented, procedural, functional, imperative. Well, there's loads of different programming paradigms that you can write computer programs in. I could list some of them here. So we've got imperative, structured, declarative, procedural, object-oriented, abbreviate that to OO, functional, and logic. And there are more programming paradigms. That's just a few and I'm going to be going into more detail about these different programming paradigms in future tutorials. But for now, I'm just going to give you a brief idea of what some of these are. Declarative, then. What have we got with declarative? Well, declarative is a way of writing programs where you state the result that you want to get rather than how to get it. So an example of this might be SQL, and SQL is an example of declarative, a declarative language, because when we're writing SQL queries on a database, we can say something like select all from this table, and that's not actually describing how the computer is going to get that data to display it to you from the database. That's just describing what you actually want it to do, so to get all the records from that table. So that's why something like SQL could be described as being declarative. The programming paradigm that you've probably come up against before is imperative. And imperative, what you're doing, what we're doing with assembly language, is we're stating our instructions step by step, and it's an explicit sequence of commands. And we don't have anything like if statements or while loops or things like that in imperative. We're just stating what we're doing step by step. So if I had an assembly program, it might say add 5, subtract 2, store in register 5 or something like that. And that would be a step by step set of instructions which would be written in an imperative style. For example, assembly. The structured programming, what we've got with structured is it's imperative, so a structured program is imperative, but it introduces control structures like loops, conditionals, so if and else, and subroutines. So that's structured programming. And procedural programming, which is what you are probably doing if you're doing sort of AS computer science at the moment, is structured programming, but with the use of calls to procedures. So procedural, I would describe as a form of structured programming with calls to procedures. Logic programming, if we skip to the bottom of the list here, I'll go over these two in a second. Logic programming is where we have a set of facts and rules that are specified by the programmer, and a logic engine is used to infer answers to questions that are asked of the program. So the programmer defines rules and facts, and then a logic engine interprets those rules and facts and gives answers to questions. We've got object-oriented programming, this OO here. And in object-oriented, what you have is objects created which have a state and behavior, and then the computation in your program is done by calling the object's methods. Then we've got functional programming here, which you'll learn about if you're doing A-level computer science. Functional programming is where we've got mathematical functions that are used as the fundamental building blocks of a program. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of some programming paradigms, what a programming paradigm is, and then some examples of programming paradigms. I'm going to go into a bit more detail in future tutorials over about the specific subtle differences between this one, and this one. So imperative, structured, and procedural. But declarative, object-oriented, functional, and logic are quite well defined and quite separate. If you want more detail on programming paradigms and how to write programs in different programming paradigms, stay tuned for my future tutorial videos. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial video. Thanks for watching.